And we weren't necessarily thrilled with the contractor, but they did a job and they were fixing any problems. But then it got carried away because the judge was extremely unfriendly to Jeanine. And frankly, I think she choked because the judge was really vicious. Instead of going after the people that did it, the judge went after her and went after her department. And I guess she choked. I don't know what the hell happened.
Are you reconsidering her role?
I don't know what. You don't. You're fake news. Don't ever talk again. You're fake news.
I think we touched a nerve there. Donald Trump lashing out at our colleague, MS Now's Jake Traylor in the Oval Office today. Traylor pressing about the simple fact pattern from Donald Trump. Attorney the District of Columbia, Trump's buddy, Jeanine Pirro, dropping the charges of vandalism her office had filed against former Olympian David Hearn less than 1 month ago. While Pirro promised that her office would prove the charges of vandalizing the reflecting pool beyond a reasonable doubt, her office found that despite Trump's claims that, quote, I'm a really good builder, it was his shoddy contractors, not vandalism at all, responsible for the lining coming apart in pieces. We're back with Glenn, Liz, and Andrew. Andrew, let me read you what Heather Cox Richardson wrote just to sort of elevate this story to the real danger that it represents and the real window into what's rotten at the Department of Justice. She writes, Friday's dismissal of the Department of Justice case against David Hearn for vandalism of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool came days after Hearn's lawyers asked for transcripts of the grand jury proceedings that led to the indictment. The lawyers noted that the government's only witness testified that the pool was already damaged before Hearn went near it, and that the witness could not quantify the cost of any damage Hearn might have done over and above the cost of repairing the existing damage. The lawyers told the court that there were irregularities in the government's presentation of the evidence to the grand jury that call into question whether the grand jury was misled. The Department of Justice has been caught repeatedly misleading grand juries or committing misconduct in getting indictments. Hearn's lawyers were suggesting that the Department of Justice engaged in the same misconduct in the indictment of David Hearn for damaging the bottom of the reflecting pool. So we talk a lot. I have endeavored since the show began, with your help, with all of your help, to cover the rule of law in America. It is clear that the Justice Department is now committed to a project of destroying it. And I asked your former colleague, I asked Jack Smith if it's broken, and he said no, because the judiciary and the judges. But it would appear that the Justice Department is actively working at breaking it if they are actively misleading grand juries. Just talk about what a tripwire has been passed.
Well, the filing that was made by Jeanine Pirro's office is so devastating because in black and white, you can see so many things. And as I have said about the reflecting pool case, it is truly a reflection of the Justice Department and the Trump administration in sort of every way. It points out that what Donald Trump has been saying repeatedly about these being vandals is false. It lays it out in black and white. It also makes clear that they wrongly charged an individual, and they did so at the speed of light without waiting to see the evidence and getting the evidence. The filing seems to think it's an excuse that they did not have all the evidence from the agency involved. But that's the Department of Justice's job, as Liz will tell you. That is what you do before you indict, not after. It is not an excuse if you would hear from anybody, like a beginning AUSA, federal prosecutor, to a seasoned one, to say, well, I didn't get all the proof before I charged. But that's what it makes clear they did here. And there's only one reason to call that they would do that, which was to indict because that's what Donald Trump wanted, because he wanted to say they were vandals, and so they picked a scapegoat and they charged him, and it is now in black and white that is what happened. And just to tie it back to, this is happening while Tab Blanche, the head of the Justice Department, is awaiting confirmation. In any normal world, heads would roll for this. But that's not the world we're in, because the real issue now is Donald Trump saying, why did you stop prosecuting? I'm angry that you told the truth about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, this is sort of back to the last conversation, threats to judges. The judge didn't do anything irregular. The irregularities are from the Justice Department. And then here's, to our last conversation, Republican senators in on the joke. Here's Kennedy saying that, of course, none of this was based in reality or truth.
The whole thing is a multiple vehicle pileup. Let me start with the president. The president says it was caused by vandals. I don't know whether he really believes that, or it's part of his political messaging, or he's just thinking out loud. You and I both know the president well. He exists loudly, and he grows anxious when he has an unexpressed thought. I'm not saying he doesn't really believe it. I just don't know.
Again, if you're talking about a kid in trouble again for saying things that turn out not to be true, that's a perfectly acceptable description. We're talking about the President of the United States, and he is one of the president's cheerleaders in sort of shrugging his shoulders when Trump says crazy shit that doesn't hold up in a grand jury. What is the temperature of all this sort of sleepwalking as the Justice Department's credibility is called out by judge after judge after judge after judge?
Well, I want to step out of the frame for 2 seconds. The thing that's interesting about this is how silly it is. Can I just, we are talking about the lining of a reflecting pool. We are a nation at war.
But Mr. Hearn, they tried to criminally prosecute Mr. Hearn.
No. Yeah, exactly. But we are in a situation where the President of the United States over the weekend denied a credible report that Iranians were hacking water systems. That appears to be on its face a significant threat to national security. He is not talking about that. He is talking about the reflecting pool. So I think the threshold onto this is, why are we talking about reflecting pools? Because Donald Trump wants to talk about reflecting pools. And I think inside the Justice Department, it is entropic. You have a situation in which people are essentially pursuing the president's interests, but also within that frame, pursuing their own interests. Blanche is a perfect example. Blanche wants to be an officially confirmed attorney general. There's a lot of people inside the department who want to know why the hell he would want that job, right? But he really wants that. That's the crown of his career. Pirro, similarly, as I think Andrew alluded to, I think Pirro is acutely conscious that she could be facing professional discipline, or prosecutors under her could be facing professional discipline if we start surfacing these grand jury transcripts. So it is in her self-interest to have documented her withdrawal from this case in minute detail. And that, of course, has now put her on a collision course with Trump. So it's like you have Trump acting in his interest, other people abiding by that, and then everyone else is iterative of him acting to a certain extent like mini Trumps in their own self-interest.